I carried that red debit card for 7 years, fueling myself on the shame attached to it rather than the $10,000 inside. But when I finally handed it to the teller, she didn't just run it. She recoiled. She leaned in, whispering to ask if I was being followed. As the manager slid a statement across the desk, I realized I hadn't been carrying a simple bank card all this time. I had been carrying a bomb. My name is Claire Martin, and I am 36 years old. I sat on the edge of a chair that was designed to be comfortable only for people who had money, my knees pressed together to hide the fraying hem of my jeans. The Granite Harbor Bank in downtown Boston smelled of floor wax and old money, a scent that was distinct from the smell of the laundromat or the diner where I spent most of my waking hours. The air conditioning was set to a temperature that felt aggressive, a chill that seeped right through my thin cardigan and settled into my bones. I clutched my handbag in my lap. It was a knockoff I had bought at a discount store 3 years ago, and the fake leather was peeling at the corners, revealing the gray fabric underneath. My knuckles were white. Inside that bag, buried under a handful of crumpled receipts and a pack of tissues, was the red card. It was scratched. The laminate was peeling slightly at the edges. I had not taken it out of its hiding place in 7 years. For 7 years. That card had been a symbol. It was a physical manifestation of my refusal to be bought. It was my pride. It was the only thing I had left after Grant Halstead destroyed my life. And I had sworn on my mother's grave that I would starve before I used a single cent of his pity money. But pride does not pay the rent. I closed my eyes and saw Marla Jenkins's face as she had appeared in my doorway at 6 o'clock this morning. Marla was my landlady, a woman who wore floral muumuus and possessed a heart made of flint. She had not shouted. Marla never shouted. She had simply leaned against the doorframe and told me that if I did not have the back rent, plus the late fees by noon today, she was calling the sheriff to put my things on the curb. And then there was the other thing, the loan I had taken out to pay for my father's emergency surgery. The people I borrowed from did not send polite letters. They sent text messages that listed my work schedule and the bus route I took home. I was cornered. My moral high ground had eroded into a mudslide of debt and fear. I had no choice. I had to swallow the bile in my throat, walk into this bank, and withdraw the $10,000 Grant had thrown at me like I was a cheap service provider he was tipping for a job well done. "Next," a voice called out. I flinched. I looked up to see a teller at window 4 waving me over. Her name tag read, Renee Sloan. She looked to be about 22, with perfectly manicured nails and eyes that had already decided I was a waste of her time. I stood up. My legs felt heavy. I walked across the polished marble floor, the sound of my cheap sneakers squeaking slightly with every step. I felt the eyes of the security guard on my back. I felt like an intruder. I felt like a thief. When I reached the counter, I didn't say hello. I couldn't trust my voice to remain steady. I reached into my bag and pulled out the red card. I slid it under the glass partition. Renee looked at the card. She looked at the worn magnetic strip. Then she looked at me. Her gaze traveled from my messy hair down to my peeling bag, cataloging every failure, every missing dollar sign. "I want to close the account," I said. My voice sounded thin, like dry leaves scraping together. "I want to withdraw the full balance." Renee picked up the card with 2 fingers, as if it were contaminated. "Do you have identification?" I handed her my driver's license. She glanced at it, then back at the screen. She sighed, a short puff of air that said she would rather be anywhere else. She typed something on her keyboard, her long acrylic nails clicking a rhythm of boredom. Then she swiped the card. I held my breath. I expected a decline. I expected a notification that the account had been closed years ago due to inactivity. I expected Grant to have canceled it just to spite me, to leave me standing here in the rain one last time. Renee's hand froze mid-air. The rhythmic clicking of her nails stopped. I watched her face. The boredom vanished, replaced by a sudden, sharp confusion. She blinked. She leaned closer to her monitor, squinting as if she could not believe what she was reading. Then, the color drained out of her face. It didn't happen gradually. It happened all at once, leaving her skin the color of old parchment. A distinct, low tone chimed from her computer. It was not the cheerful beep of a transaction approval. It was a dull, heavy thud of a sound. Renee looked up at me. Her eyes were wide now. The contempt was gone, replaced by something that looked terrifyingly like fear. She didn't speak. She didn't hand me back my ID. She simply stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor, and stepped back from the counter. "Wait right here," she whispered. She turned and practically ran toward the back offices, disappearing behind a heavy oak door. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. What was happening? Panic began to claw at my throat. Had the card been reported stolen? Was there a warrant out for my arrest? Grant? It had to be Grant. He was a man who played chess while everyone else was playing checkers. He hadn't just given me money. He had given me a trap. He knew I would eventually break. He knew I would eventually try to use it. And he had set something up to humiliate me, or worse, to frame me. I looked around the lobby. The security guard was still standing by the door. His arms crossed. Did he know? Was he about to come over here and put handcuffs on me? I imagined the scene, Marla Jenkins watching from the sidewalk as I was dragged out. My father dying alone in a hospital bed because his daughter was in a holding cell. I considered running. I could leave the card. I could leave my ID. I just needed to get out of here before the police arrived. I took a step back. "Ms. Martin?" The voice came from my left. I jumped, spinning around. A man was standing there. He was older, perhaps in his 50s, wearing a suit that cost more than my father's car. His name tag identified him as Victor Dorsey, branch manager. He was breathless, his chest heaving slightly as if he had run all the way from the vault. There were beads of sweat glistening on his forehead. He wasn't looking at me with suspicion. He was looking at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. "Ms. Martin," he repeated, his voice dropping to a hush. "Please, come with me." He gestured toward the glass-walled offices at the side of the bank, the VIP section, the place where people with portfolios and estates went to drink espresso and discuss tax shelters. "I just want my money," I stammered, backing away. "Look, if there is a problem, just give me my license back. I will leave. I do not want any trouble." "There is no trouble, ma'am," Victor said quickly, too quickly. He stepped closer, effectively blocking my path to the exit. He lowered his voice even further. "Please, we cannot discuss this in the lobby. It is a matter of sensitive security. Please." There was desperation in his eyes. I looked at the door. I looked at Victor. If I ran, I looked guilty. If I stayed, I might be walking into a trap. But I had $3 in my bank account and an eviction notice on my door. I had nowhere else to go. I nodded. Victor let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for a long time. He guided me through the gate, past the staring eyes of the other customers, past Renee's empty window, and into a corner office that looked more like a library than a bank room. He closed the door and locked it. Then he went to the blinds and twisted the wand, shutting out the rest of the world. "Please, sit down," he said, gesturing to a leather armchair. I sat on the edge, ready to bolt. Victor moved behind his massive mahogany desk. He didn't sit. He stood there, wringing his hands. He looked at his computer screen, then at me, then back at the screen. He picked up a folder that Renee must have printed out and placed it on the desk between us. "Ms. Martin," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "I apologize for the reaction of my teller. This account, it has a very specific set of protocols attached to it. Protocols we have not seen activated in a very long time." I swallowed hard. "Protocols? What are you talking about? It is a debit card. My ex-husband gave it to me 7 years ago. There is $10,000 on it. Or there was. Look, if the maintenance fees ate it all up, just tell me. I will leave." Victor looked at me with a strange expression. Pity? Awe? I couldn't tell. "Ms. Martin," he said softly, This is not a standard checking account. This is a fiduciary growth account managed by a blind trust, with an escrow sub-account attached. The words meant nothing to me. They were lawyer words, rich people words. I do not understand, I said. Is the money there or not? Victor took a deep breath. He turned the monitor around so I could see it. The initial deposit was indeed $10,000, he said. However, the account was set up with aggressive automated reinvestment instructions. It bought into tech startups in 2017. It shorted housing derivatives in 2019. It moved into biomed futures right before the pandemic. He paused. And there is the escrow, he added, a secondary deposit that was programmed to merge with the primary account only if the account remained untouched for a minimum of 84 months, 7 years. I stared at the screen. The numbers were small black text on a white background. I tried to focus. So, I whispered, feeling like an idiot. Is the $10,000 still there? Victor Dorsey swallowed. He looked at me as if I were a child asking if the sun was hot. Ms. Martin, he said, the current available balance is $2,462,318.42. The room went silent. The air conditioning hummed. A car honked outside on the street. I stared at him. My brain refused to process the sentence. $2 million? I whispered. $2.46 million, he corrected. I felt the blood leave my head. I gripped the arms of the chair. This was a joke. It had to be. Grant didn't have this kind of money. When we divorced, he was a mid-level consultant. We rented a condo. We leased our cars. This was impossible. There must be a mistake, I said. This is a mistake. It is not a mistake, Victor said. He was typing something now. But Ms. Martin, the money is not the primary reason I brought you back here. He stopped typing. He looked up at me. And for the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. He pointed a trembling finger at a red text box flashing at the bottom of his screen. When Ms. Sloan swiped your card, it triggered a system-wide alert, Victor said. It is a level 1 directive. I have worked at this bank for 20 years, and I have never seen a level 1 directive. I leaned forward, trying to read the text, but my vision was blurry. What does it say? Victor read it out loud. His voice was flat, mechanical. It says, if Claire Martin appears in person to access these funds, contact the number on file immediately. Do not allow her to leave. Secure the perimeter. He looked up at me. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Secure the perimeter? I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Am I under arrest? No, Victor said. It is not a police alert. It is a private security instruction. He reached for the phone on his desk. His hand hovered over the receiver. He looked at the peeling fake leather of my bag. He looked at my worn-out shoes. He looked at the terror in my eyes. He pulled his hand back. He leaned across the desk, his face inches from the glass partition. Ms. Martin, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I need you to answer me honestly. This is very important. He glanced at the door to make sure it was still locked, then looked back at me, his eyes searching mine for any sign of deception. Did you come here alone? He asked. Is there anyone waiting for you outside? Anyone watching you? I came alone, I stammered. I took the bus. Victor's face paled further. He looked at the red text on the screen again. Then we have a problem, he said. Because according to this log, the notification was sent the second that card was swiped, and whoever is on the other end of that number, they are already on their way. I sat frozen. The $2 million evaporated from my mind. The only thing left was the cold, hard realization that I had walked into something far bigger than a bank account. I had pulled a thread, and the whole world was unraveling. Victor stood up. He didn't pick up the phone. Instead, he walked over to the shredder in the corner of the room. He picked up the printout of my account balance. the paper that proved I was a millionaire, and he held it for a second. "Do not go out the front door," he said. "What?" "The front door," he hissed. "Do not go out there." He came back to the desk and wrote something on a sticky note. He slid it across to me. It was a 10-digit phone number, not the bank's number. "This note on the screen," he said, pointing to the computer. "It says to call the number on file, but there is a secondary note here, a hidden field. It says, 'Give her the packet A from the safe deposit vault.'" I stared at him. "What packet?" "I do not know," Victor said, "but if you have $2 million in this account, and someone left a level 1 directive to protect it or to trap you, you need to know what is in that packet before the people who are coming get here." He looked at his watch. "You have maybe 5 minutes," he said. "Do you want the money, or do you want the truth?" I looked at the sticky note. I looked at the door. I thought about the 7 years of poverty. I thought about the loan shark. I thought about Grant, laughing at me in the rain. "I want both," I said. Victor nodded. "Then follow me, and pray that the traffic in Boston is bad today." The air in the bank vault was recycled and stale, but the air in my memory was sharp enough to cut glass. Victor Dorsey mentioned 7 years, and suddenly, the mahogany desk and the digital screen vanished. I was no longer sitting in a climate-controlled office in Boston. I was standing outside the family court in Providence, Rhode Island. It was November, and the sky was the color of a fresh bruise. It was raining. But not the kind of romantic rain you see in the movies where the couple kisses and makes up. This was a freezing, relentless New England downpour that smelled of exhaust fumes and rotting leaves. It was the kind of rain that soaked through your clothes in seconds and made your skin feel raw. I stood at the bottom of the concrete stairs, shivering violently. In my right hand, I clutched the manila envelope containing our divorce decree. The paper was already damp, curling at the edges, the ink probably bleeding into the fibers just like my life was bleeding out into the gutter. Grant Halstead stood 3 steps above me. He always liked to have the high ground. He was wearing a dark wool coat that fit him perfectly. The collar turned up against the wind. He looked expensive. He looked composed. While I was shaking, my hair plastered to my skull, looking like a drowned rat. Grant looked like he was merely waiting for a valet to bring his car around after a boring business meeting. He had a cigarette in his hand. I watched the smoke curl up and disappear into the gray curtain of rain. He took a drag, his eyes narrowing as he looked down at me. There was no love in those eyes. There was no anger, either. Anger implies passion. Anger implies that he still cared enough to be upset. Instead, his gaze was flat, cold, and devastatingly indifferent. It was the way you look at a piece of furniture you have decided to throw away, because it no longer matches the drapes. There was a flicker of pity there, but it was cheap pity. It was the kind of pity you feel for a stray dog right before you keep walking. He reached into the inner pocket of his coat. I flinched. I hated that I flinched. I thought he might be reaching for a pen, or maybe a tissue to offer me. Instead, he pulled out a small, red rectangle. It was the card, the debit card. He did not hand it to me. He did not reach out and place it in my palm. He did not offer a single bridge of human contact. He flicked his wrist and let it drop. I watched it fall in slow motion. The red plastic tumbled through the air, catching a glint of the street lamp, before it landed with a wet slap in a muddy puddle right between my sneakers. Dirty water splashed up onto my ankles. The card floated there, surrounded by cigarette butts and oil slicks. "Pin is your birthday," Grant said. His voice was smooth, detached, cutting through the sound of the rain and the traffic. 10 grand. Consider it payment for your time. Do not show your face again." The words hit me harder than the cold. Payment for my time. 5 years of marriage. 5 years of washing his clothes, cooking his meals, supporting his dreams, listening to his fears in the middle of the night. 5 years of trying to have a baby that never happened. 5 years of my life, reduced to a transaction. He spoke as if I were a contractor he had hired to paint a fence, and now the job was done. And he was settling the invoice. $10,000. I stared at the card in the mud. The red plastic looked violent against the gray pavement. My first instinct was to kick it. I wanted to kick it back up at him. I wanted to scream that I did not want his dirty money, that I was not a prostitute he could pay off to leave quietly. I wanted to tear the divorce papers in half and throw the confetti in his face. I wanted to have dignity, but then my stomach growled. It was a loud, hollow sound that seemed to echo in the space between us. I had not eaten a real meal in 2 days. My bank account was overdrawn by $40. My credit cards were maxed out from paying the legal fees to fight a battle I had already lost. I had no job, no apartment, and a car that was running on fumes and prayer. Dignity is a luxury for people who have had breakfast. I looked at Grant. He hadn't moved. He was watching me, waiting to see if I would bend. He wanted me to bend. He wanted to see me on my knees, digging in the filth for his scraps. I hated him then with a purity that frightened me. Slowly, painfully, I bent my knees. I crouched down in the rain. I could feel the cold water seeping through the knees of my jeans, soaking into my skin. I reached out with a trembling hand and plunged my fingers into the freezing, dirty puddle. I grabbed the card. It was slippery with mud. I wiped it on my thigh, leaving a dark smear on the denim. I stood up, clutching the plastic so hard the corners dug into my palm. I looked at Grant, waiting for him to gloat, waiting for him to smile, but he didn't. He just took one last drag of his cigarette, dropped it on the stairs, and crushed it out with the heel of his polished leather boot. "Goodbye, Claire," he said. He turned his back on me. He walked down the steps, past me, toward the curb where a black SUV was idling. It was a massive vehicle, shiny and new, looking like a tank designed for suburban warfare. The back door opened before he even reached it. I saw her. I didn't see her face clearly, but I saw enough. I saw a sleek curtain of blonde hair. I saw a hand reaching out to pull him in, a hand with a diamond bracelet that caught the light even in the gloom. I saw a flash of a cream-colored coat that looked soft and warm and completely dry. I believed she was the new girlfriend, the upgrade, the reason I was standing in the rain holding a wet piece of plastic while she was sitting in heated leather seats. Grant climbed in. The heavy door thudded shut, sealing him into his new life. The tinted windows turned black, reflecting my own pathetic image back at me. The SUV pulled away, splashing more water onto the sidewalk, merging into the traffic of downtown Providence. I stood there for a long time. I stood there until I could no longer feel my toes. I stood there until the paper of the divorce decree disintegrated in my hand, leaving me holding nothing but wet pulp. But I still had the card. I walked 3 miles back to the temporary room I was renting in a basement in Pawtucket. I did not take the bus because I did not want to spend the $2. I walked through the rain, letting the cold numb me, letting the hatred harden inside my chest like concrete setting in a mold. When I got to my room, I stripped off my wet clothes. I didn't turn on the heat because I couldn't afford the oil bill. I sat on the edge of the sunken mattress, wrapped in a blanket that smelled of mildew, and I stared at the card. $10,000. I could go to the grocery store right now. I could buy a hot chicken. I could buy a bottle of wine. I could pay my rent for 6 months. I could fix my car. I could buy a winter coat that actually zipped up. All I had to do was go to an ATM and type in my birthday. But I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that if I used that card, I would die. Not physically. My heart would keep beating. But the part of me that was Claire Martin, the part of me that still believed I was a human being worthy of respect, would wither and die. Using that money was admitting that he was right. It was admitting that I was something to be paid off. It was accepting his valuation of my existence. If I spent a single dollar, I was taking his charity. I was letting him save me. I stood up and went to the closet. I pulled down an old shoebox where I kept the useless artifacts of my life. A receipt from our honeymoon. A photo of us from college where we looked young and stupid. A dried flower from my father's garden. I placed the red card in the center of the box. It sat there like a radioactive isotope. "I will never touch you," I whispered to the card. "I will starve first. I will sleep on the street first." I put the lid on the box. I shoved it to the back of the shelf, behind a stack of old towels. That night, I ate a can of cold beans I found in the back of the cupboard. I drank tap water, and I went to bed shivering. For the next 7 years, that box remained in every closet of every lousy apartment I lived in. There were times I almost broke. There was the winter of 2020 when I got pneumonia and couldn't afford the antibiotics. I lay in bed, coughing until I tasted blood. Knowing the cure was sitting in a shoebox 10 feet away, I didn't open it. I rode out the fever with Tylenol in spite. There was the time my car broke down on the highway in the middle of the night, and the tow truck driver wanted $300 cash, or he was leaving me there. I walked home. I walked 6 miles in the dark, terrified, clutching my keys between my fingers as a weapon, muttering curses against Grant with every step. There was the month I ate nothing but rice and eggs. There was the month I had to sell my grandmother's ring to pay the electric bill. Every time hunger gnawed at my stomach, every time a bill collector called, every time I looked in the mirror and saw a new wrinkle caused by stress. I thought of the card, and I thought of Grant throwing it in the mud. I used that memory as fuel. I burned my anger to keep warm. I told myself that I was winning. Every day that the balance remained $10,000 was a victory. It was a silent middle finger raised to the man who thought he could buy my disappearance. I thought I was being strong. I thought I was being noble. I didn't live on money. I lived on hate. Hate is a very efficient fuel. It burns hot, and it burns long. But it leaves you hollowed out, covered in soot, unable to feel anything soft or gentle. I sat there in Victor Dorsey's office, blinking the rain out of my eyes, returning to the present. The silence of the bank felt deafening after the roar of the memory. I had kept that card for 7 years to prove a point. I had kept it to prove I was free of him. But as I looked at Victor and thought about the $2.46 million sitting in that account and the security team rushing toward us, I realized the joke was on me. I hadn't been free. Grant hadn't given me $10,000 to pay me off. He hadn't thrown it in the mud to humiliate me. He had planted a seed, and while I was busy hating him, while I was busy staring at the mud, he had been watering the garden. "Ms. Martin?" Victor's voice was gentle, pulling me all the way back. "We need to move." I looked down at my hands. They were trembling, just like they had 7 years ago in Providence, but this time, it wasn't from the cold. "I remember," I whispered. I stood up. The ghost of the girl who knelt in the puddle was gone. I was someone else now. I was a woman with $2 million and a target on her back. "Show me the packet," I said, "and get me out the back door." The 7 years between that rain-soaked day in Providence and the moment I sat in Victor Dorsey's office were not a single blur of time. They were a slow, grinding accumulation of days that felt heavy enough to break bone. To understand why I was trembling in that leather chair, staring at a balance of over $2 million, you have to understand the woman who walked into the bank. You have to understand the Claire Martin who had been forged in the fires of American poverty. I worked for a company called Northline Risk Analytics. The name on the letterhead suggested a sleek, glass-walled firm where people wore Italian suits and discussed global markets. The reality was a windowless room in a converted warehouse in South Boston, where 50 of us sat in gray cubicles under fluorescent lights that hummed with a headache-inducing frequency. My job title was Data Verification Associate. It sounds professional. In practice, it meant I spent 8 hours a day staring at spreadsheets, cross-referencing insurance claims against public records, searching for reasons to deny people money. I made $18 an hour. After taxes, health insurance, and the bus pass, my take-home pay was enough to cover rent and electricity, assuming I never ate and never got sick. But eating is a biological requirement, so I had a second life. At 5:30 in the afternoon, I clocked out of Northline, changed in the bathroom, and ran 3 blocks to a tavern called the Rusty Anchor. I spent the next 6 hours on my feet, carrying trays of heavy beer pitchers and greasy burgers to men who thought leaving a $2 tip gave them the right to call me sweetheart or touch the small of my back. My sneakers were always sticky with spilled ale. My hair always smelled like fryer grease. By the time I got home at midnight, my ankles were swollen to twice their normal size, and on weekends, I cleaned houses. I scrubbed the toilets of women my age who had married better or chosen wiser. I polished their granite countertops and folded their cashmere sweaters, trying not to think about the fact that one of their throw pillows cost more than my monthly food budget. I told myself I was building character. I told myself I was independent. Then my father got sick. It started as a cough, the kind you ignore because you cannot afford the copay to see a doctor. Then it became a rattle in his chest. Then it became a collapse in the grocery store. The diagnosis was a complex respiratory condition that required specialists, treatments, and a specific medication that his Medicare plan decided was Tier 4 non-preferred. The American medical system is a labyrinth designed to strip you of your dignity before it saves your life. I spent hours on the phone with insurance adjusters, listening to hold music, begging for coverage. The bills started arriving in envelopes that had red text stamped on the front. Past due. Final notice. Collections. I drained my small savings account in 2 weeks. I stopped paying the electric bill to pay for his inhalers, but it was not enough. There was a procedure he needed. A lung volume reduction surgery that the insurance deemed elective, but the doctor said was necessary for him to breathe without pain. That was when I met the people who lend money to people who have no business borrowing it. I signed a loan agreement with an interest rate of 36%. I knew it was suicide. I knew the math did not work. But looking at my father gasping for air in a hospital bed made the math irrelevant. I signed the papers. I took the cash. I paid the hospital. And then the noose tightened. There were months during those 7 years when my diet consisted entirely of instant ramen noodles and tap water. I became an expert in which grocery stores discounted their bakery items after 9 at night. I learned how to sew the hem of my winter coat with dental floss because I could not afford a tailor and I could not afford a new coat. I remember one specific Tuesday in February. It was freezing, the kind of cold that makes your teeth ache. I needed $10 to put on my transit card so I could get to work. I stood in front of an ATM inside a bodega, shivering, and I put in my card. I requested $20. The machine whirred, clunked, and then spit out a receipt. Insufficient funds. I requested $10. Insufficient funds. I checked the balance. $0.00. I stood there, staring at the glowing green screen. People were waiting behind me. I should have felt shame. I should have cried. Instead, a laugh bubbled up from my chest. It was a dry, jagged sound. I laughed because the absurdity of it was perfect. I was working 80 hours a week. I was exhausted. I was doing everything right, everything society tells you to do, and I literally did not have a dime to my name. I laughed until the clerk behind the counter asked if I was on drugs. I walked out of the store and walked the 4 miles to work in the snow, and through it all, the red card sat in the shoebox. It became a ritual. On the nights when the hunger was bad, or when the loan shark sent a text message threatening to visit my workplace, I would go to the closet, I would take down the box, I would move the old photos and the dried flour aside, and I would look at the card. It was scratched and dusty. The magnetic strip was worn. I would pick it up. I would hold it. It would have been so easy. I knew the PIN. It was my birthday. I could walk to an ATM and withdraw $500. I could buy groceries. I could pay the interest on the loan. I could buy my father a comfortable chair. But every time I held it, I saw Grant's face. I saw the smoke from his cigarette. I heard him say, "Consider it payment for your time." If I used that money, I was selling myself. I was agreeing that 5 years of marriage was worth $10,000. I was admitting that I could not survive without him. So I would put the card back. I would put the lid on the box. I would shove it to the back of the closet. I called it pride. I called it strength. I was wrong. It was not strength. It was a chain. I had turned my self-respect into a prison cell. I was so afraid of owing him something that I allowed myself to live like an animal. I wore my suffering like a badge of honor, convinced that my poverty was proof of my moral superiority. But moral superiority does not keep the heat on. The breaking point came the morning of the bank visit. I woke up at 6 a.m. to the sound of pounding on my apartment door. My heart jumped into my throat. I thought it was the loan sharks. I grabbed a kitchen knife and crept to the peephole. It was Marla Jenkins. I opened the door. Marla was a large woman who smelled of cigarettes and lavender laundry detergent. She did not look happy. "Claire," she said. She didn't say good morning. "I need the rent. I get paid on Friday," I said, reciting the lie I had told her 3 times already. "Northline had a payroll glitch." Marla shook her head. "I called Northline. Claire, they said payroll went out 2 days ago. Do not lie to me." My face burned. "Marla, please, my dad." "I am sorry about your dad." She cut me off. "Truly, but I have a mortgage. You are 2 months behind. You have until noon." "Noon?" I gasped. "Marla, I can't get $2,000 by noon." "Then I am changing the locks," she said. Her voice was flat. "And I am calling the sheriff to oversee the eviction. I have already filled out the paperwork. Noon, Claire, or your stuff goes on the sidewalk." She turned and walked away. I closed the door and leaned my forehead against the peeling paint. I looked around my apartment. It was a studio that measured 300 square feet. The faucet leaked. The window had a crack in it that I had taped over with duct tape. There was a stain on the carpet that looked like a map of South America. It was a dump, but it was my dump. It was the only place in the world where I could lock the door and be safe. If I lost this, where would I go? A shelter? My father's tiny room at the assisted living facility where they would not let me sleep on the floor? My phone buzzed. It was a text message from a number I did not recognize. "Payment due today. Don't make us come find you." The walls seemed to close in. The air in the room felt thin. I sank down onto the floor and pulled my knees to my chest. I was 36 years old. I had a college degree. I worked 3 jobs, and I was about to be homeless. I had lost. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I had fought for 7 years to be independent, to be the woman who didn't need Grant Halstead, and I had failed. I had failed completely and utterly. The world was stronger than my pride. The economy was stronger than my will. I stood up. I walked to the closet. I didn't hesitate this time. I took down the shoebox. I took out the red card. I looked at it, and for the first time in 7 years, I didn't feel anger. I felt defeat. Total, absolute surrender. "You win, Grant," I whispered to the empty room. "You win." I put the card in my bag. I put on my coat with the frayed hem. I looked at the apartment one last time, memorizing the crack in the window and the stain on the rug, knowing I might never come back here. My plan was simple. I would go to the Granite Harbor Bank. I would withdraw the $10,000 in cash. I would pay Marla the $2,000 I owed her just to keep her quiet for a day. I swiped that card expecting to salvage a few crumbs of survival from the wreckage of my pride. I had no idea that I wasn't ending anything. I had no idea that the moment that magnetic strip slid through the reader, I wasn't just accessing an account, I was detonating a tripwire that had been waiting for me in the dark for 84 months. I entered that bank a beggar. I was sitting in Victor Dorsey's office as a millionaire, but looking at Victor's pale face and hearing him talk about perimeters and security teams, I realized that the poverty of the last 7 years might have been the safe option. I had traded the wolf at the door for the monster in the basement. "I am ready," I told Victor, my hand tightening on the strap of my bag. "Open the safe." The hunger in my stomach was still there. The hole in my shoe was still there. But the fear had changed flavor. It was no longer the dull ache of survival. It was the sharp, metallic taste of danger. And God help me. After 7 years of being numb, it felt good to feel something sharp. I exited Granite Harbor Bank through a heavy steel door in the loading bay that Victor Dorsey had unlocked with a trembling hand. The air outside was humid and smelled of diesel from a delivery truck idling nearby. I was clutching a new black debit card in my pocket so tight my fingers were cramping. It was cool to the touch. Heavy. Metal. Not plastic. It felt alien against my hip. Like I was carrying a loaded weapon I didn't know how to fire. I walked fast. I didn't run, because running draws attention. But I walked with the frantic energy of someone who expects a hand to grab their shoulder at any second. I turned a corner, putting a block of limestone between me and the bank, and leaned against the cold brick wall of a pharmacy. I gasped for air, my lungs burning. $2.46 million. The number bounced around my skull, refusing to settle. It was an abstraction. It was a lottery win. It was a mistake, but the fear in Victor's eyes had been real. The level 1 directive was real. I needed answers. I needed the source. I pulled my phone out. The screen was cracked in the corner. A spiderweb fracture from when I dropped it 6 months ago and couldn't afford the repair. My thumb hovered over the contacts list. I hadn't deleted it. In 7 years of scrubbing my life clean of him, of burning photos and selling rings, I had never deleted his number. It was buried under G, a digital ghost I scrolled past every day. I pressed the call button. I held the phone to my ear, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I expected it to ring. I expected him to pick up with that cool, detached voice, maybe sounding surprised, maybe sounding smug. Well, Claire, you finally broke. We're sorry, a robotic female voice intoned. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Please check the number and try again. The line went dead. I pulled the phone away and stared at it. I dialed again. Maybe I had a bad signal. Maybe the network was down. We're sorry. The number you have dialed. I hung up and dialed again, and again, and again, 5 times. The same flat, pre-recorded rejection. It wasn't just that he wasn't answering. The line didn't exist. It was as if the electronic pathway to Grant Halstead had been severed. The wires cut and left to dangle in the void. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prick at my skin. I opened my browser. My data plan was capped, and the connection was slow, the loading bar crawling across the top of the screen like a dying insect. I typed in the name, Grant Halstead. I hit search. I expected to see a LinkedIn profile, maybe a bio for a consulting firm in New York or Chicago, maybe a wedding announcement to the blonde woman in the SUV. The first result that loaded was a news archive from the Providence Journal. The date was 5 years ago. Coast Guard suspends. Search for missing boater following marina explosion. I froze. I tapped the link, my finger shaking so bad I missed it twice. The article opened. It was short. A filler piece for a slow news day. Authorities have concluded search efforts for 39-year-old financial consultant Grant Halstead, who is presumed dead following a localized explosion and fire aboard a private vessel docked at India Point Park late Tuesday night, while no remains were recovered. Forensics indicate presumed dead. The words swam before my eyes. Presumed dead. 5 years ago. I leaned back against the brick wall, feeling the rough texture snag my cardigan. The world tilted on its axis. If Grant was dead, if he had burned in a boat fire 5 years ago, then who had been managing the account? Who had set up the escrow that triggered today? Dead men do not program banking algorithms. Dead men do not leave instructions for bank managers to call a number if their ex-wife walks into a branch in Boston, unless he wasn't dead, or unless someone else was pulling the strings. My phone buzzed in my hand, making me jump. I nearly dropped it. Unknown caller, the screen read. I stared at it. Was this the security team? Was this the level 1 contact? I slid my thumb across the screen. Hello? Ms. Martin? It was Victor Dorsey. His voice was a harsh whisper, sounding tinny and distorted. Are you clear of the building? Yes, I am a block away. Good. Listen to me. I processed the initial withdrawal limit override, but I cannot give you everything. Compliance just slapped a hold on 70% of the liquid assets. It is flagging as an unusual volume for a dormant account. Victor, I don't care about the volume. I hissed, pressing the phone harder to my ear. I just looked up my husband. The internet says he is dead. Who is authorizing this? There was a pause on the line. A heavy, loaded silence. I do not know who is on the other end, ma'am, Victor said. But the alert came from an external server. It bypassed our local security. And Ms. Martin, you need to check your pockets. Did you take the envelope? What envelope? The one I slipped into your bag while I was walking you to the loading dock. From the vault? The one the sticky note mentioned. I looked down at my battered handbag. I hadn't even noticed. I opened it, pushing aside the tissues and the pepper spray. There, wedged against the lining, was a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was sealed with red wax, old and brittle. I have it, I said. Do not open it on the street, Victor warned. And Ms. Martin, stop standing still. You are a stationary target. The line clicked and went dead. Stationary target. I looked up. The street was busy with the mid-morning rush. Delivery trucks, pedestrians in suits, tourists looking at maps. It was normal. It was mundane. But then I saw it. Across the street, parked in a loading zone, was a black sedan. It was idling. The windows were tinted darker than was legal in Massachusetts. It had been there since I came out of the alley. I hadn't registered it before, but now it seemed to pulse with menace. A man was leaning against the fender. He was wearing a gray hoodie and sunglasses. Despite the overcast sky, he was looking at his phone, scrolling with his thumb. But his head wasn't tilted down enough. The angle of his sunglasses was directed straight at me. He knew I was looking. He didn't flinch. He just slowly put the phone in his pocket and pushed himself off the car. Adrenaline dumped into my bloodstream like ice water. I turned and walked. I walked fast, weaving through a group of tourists. I didn't look back. I took a sharp right at the corner, then a quick left down a narrow street lined with dumpsters. I needed to get to the subway. I needed to get underground. My mind was racing, trying to connect the dots. Grant is dead. Grant left me money. Someone is watching me. Who did I know? Who was left from that life? I had cut everyone off. When the divorce happened, our mutual friends had chosen sides, and the side with the money always wins. They went to his parties. I went to a basement apartment in Pawtucket. I had deleted their numbers, unfollowed their socials, erased them from existence. But there was one name that stuck in the back of my throat like a fishbone. Miles Kincaid. Miles had been Grant's college roommate, his best man, his partner in crime. Miles was the only one who hadn't looked at me with total disdain at the wedding. He was rough around the edges, a guy who worked in logistics or shipping, something blue-collar adjacent but high-paying. Grant used to joke that Miles was the guy you called to bury a body, while Grant was the guy you called to explain why the body had to die. If Grant was dead, Miles would know. If Grant was alive, Miles would definitely know. I ducked into the entrance of the downtown crossing station. The air was thick and metallic. I scanned the crowd. No gray hoodie, no sunglasses. I moved toward the far end of the platform, away from the cameras, away from people. I didn't have Miles's number, but I remembered where his sister worked. She ran a bakery in the North End. It was a long shot, a desperate shot. I Googled the bakery, Sweet Sal's Pastry. I called the landline. Sweet Sal's, can I help you? A cheerful voice. I need to get a message to Miles Kincaid, I said, my voice shaking. It is an emergency, a family emergency. Who is this? The cheerfulness vanished. Tell him it is Claire, I said. Tell him the red card was declined. It was a lie, but a coded one. If Miles knew about the money, that would trigger him. I don't know where he is, the woman said. Suspicious. Just text him, I pleaded. Please, tell him Claire Martin is asking about the red card. I hung up. I waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes. The subway train rumbled in the distance, pushing a wave of stale air ahead of it. My phone rang. It was a blocked number. I answered it. Hello? There was silence on the other end. Not the robotic silence of a disconnected line, but the heavy breathing silence of a person listening. Miles? I whispered. Claire? The voice was gravel and smoke. It sounded older than I remembered, rougher. You have some nerve calling me. Grant is dead, I blurted out. I just saw it on the internet. Is it true? Is that why you called? Miles asked. His tone was guarded, defensive. To check the obituary? I called because I just walked out of Granite Harbor Bank, I said. And the manager told me I have $2 million. And then he told me to run because security was coming. The silence on the other end stretched out, tense and vibrating. You went to the bank, Miles said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of doom. God damn it. Claire, you were supposed to leave that alone. I needed the money, I shouted. Causing a woman nearby to clutch her purse and move away, I lowered my voice. I was broke, Miles. I didn't know about the millions. I just wanted the 10 grand. You triggered the beacon, Miles muttered. He sounded like he was moving. Keys jingling, a car door opening. If you swipe that card, the system went live. They know exactly where you are. Who is they? I demanded. Is Grant alive? Did he set this up? I can't talk about this on an open line, Miles snapped. Are you safe? I don't know. I think I was followed. Of course you were followed. You just lit up a flare in a dark room. Miles, help me, I said, my voice cracking. I have an envelope. The manager gave me an envelope. Do not open it, Miles commanded. Not yet. Listen to me very carefully. Do not go home. Do not go to work. If you have a car, ditch it. If you have a phone, hell, keep the phone. I need to track you. But turn off the GPS. Where do I go? There is a diner in Chelsea. The Harbor Line Diner. It's a dive. Nobody goes there after the lunch rush. Meet me in the back booth in 1 hour. Chelsea? That's miles away. Then start moving, Miles growled. Because if you are still in downtown Boston in 20 minutes, the people looking for you won't be as polite as a bank manager. He paused, and for a second, his voice softened. Just a fraction. Claire, now you remember us? After 7 years? I never forgot, I said. I just wanted to... Yeah. Well, Miles said. Welcome back to the nightmare. Get to the diner. The line went dead. I lowered the phone. My hand was sweating. The train screeched into the station, the doors sliding open with a hiss. I stepped on, squeezed between a construction worker and a student with a cello. I looked at the reflection in the dark window as we plunged into the tunnel. I looked tired. My hair was messy, my eyes wide and dark-circled. I looked like a woman who was falling apart. But beneath the fear, beneath the confusion, something else was starting to burn. It was the same heat that had kept me alive when I was starving. Grant had lied. He was presumed dead, but he had left a trap, or a lifeboat. I touched the envelope in my bag. I touched the cold metal of the black card in my pocket. $2 million. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a player in a game I didn't understand. But for the first time in 7 years, I was holding some chips. The train rattled through the dark, carrying me toward Chelsea, toward Miles, and toward a truth that I suspected was going to hurt a lot more than poverty ever did. I closed my eyes and saw the gray hoodie and the sunglasses. Secure the perimeter. Let them come. I had nothing left to lose but my life. And frankly, my life hadn't been worth much until about an hour ago. I checked the time on my phone. 58 minutes. I tightened my grip on the safety bar. I was going to make it. I had to. Because I wasn't going to let Grant Halstead, dead or alive, have the last word. The Harbor Line Diner sat on the edge of Chelsea like a shipwreck that had been dragged inland and forgotten. The neon sign out front was missing the letter E, so it just read Diane R, flashing with a rhythmic, buzzing twitch that made my eyes ache. Inside, the air was thick enough to chew on, smelling of burnt coffee, stale bacon grease, and decades of cigarette smoke that had seeped into the yellowed wallpaper long before the indoor smoking ban. I found Miles Kincaid in the back booth, the one farthest from the door and closest to the kitchen exit. I almost walked past him, The Miles I remembered was a golden retriever of a man. Loud, laughing, always wearing a Patriots jersey and holding a beer. The man in the booth looked like a coyote that had been caught in a trap and chewed its own leg off to escape. His hair was thinning and gray. His face was drawn, the skin tight over his cheekbones, and there were dark, purple shadows under his eyes that spoke of years of insomnia. His hands, resting on the sticky formica table, were trembling. He was tearing a paper napkin into tiny, precise strips. I slid into the booth opposite him. The vinyl seat squeaked, a sound that seemed too loud in the quiet lull of the afternoon. "You look terrible," I said. It was not the greeting I had planned, but it was the truth. Miles stopped tearing the napkin. He looked up at me. His eyes were bloodshot, but behind the exhaustion, I saw a spark of the old intelligence, the sharp, calculating look that Grant had always relied on. "And you," Miles said, his voice rasping like sandpaper, "look like a woman who just found out the world is flat." He reached into his leather jacket, pulled out a pack of cigarettes, tapped one out, remembered where he was, and shoved it back in. Instead of smoking, he reached for a glass of water and took a sip. His hand shook so badly the water sloshed over the rim. "Did you bring the envelope?" he asked. "I have it," I said, patting my bag. "I didn't open it. Victor said—" "Victor is a good man," Miles interrupted. "He is the only banker in Boston with a soul. That is why Grant chose him." "Grant," I said the name, and it tasted like vinegar. "Tell me the truth. Miles, is he dead?" Miles didn't answer immediately. He reached into a manila folder sitting next to him and slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a newspaper clipping, yellowed and brittle, encased in a clear plastic sleeve. I looked down. It was the obituary. "Local financial consultant presumed dead in boat fire." "He is dead on paper," Miles said softly. "The death certificate is real. The police report is real. The insurance payout, which went to a shell company in the Caymans, was real. As far as the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the United States government are concerned, Grant Halstead burned to death 5 years ago." "But he is not dead," I whispered. "Is he?" Miles looked at the door, scanning the few patrons, a trucker eating pie, an old woman counting change. Then he looked back at me. "No," he said. "He is not dead." I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost blinded me. I slammed my hand down on the table. The silverware clattered. "Then where the hell is he?" I hissed. "I spent 7 years living in hell. Miles, I ate noodles. I froze in the winter. I let people humiliate me. And he has been alive? Playing dead? And he left me $2.46 million just to what? To laugh at me?" "To keep you alive," Miles said. His voice was not defensive. It was tired. "And to keep you from becoming leverage." "Leverage for what?" "For Wade Mercer." The name hung in the air between us. I didn't know it. It sounded like a law firm or a brand of expensive shoes. "Who is Wade Mercer?" "Orchard and Vale Capital," Miles said. "A hedge fund, or that is what they call themselves. Grant was their lead analyst. 10 years ago, Grant found something. He thought he was looking at a portfolio discrepancy. What he found was a laundering operation that made the cartel look like a lemonade stand. Mercer was washing money for everyone. Warlords, traffickers, rogue states, you name the evil. Wade Mercer was cleaning its cash." I stared at him. It sounded like a movie. It sounded ridiculous. "Grant was an accountant, Miles, not James Bond." "Grant was a genius," Miles corrected. "And he made a mistake. He tried to do the right thing. He gathered evidence. He was going to the SEC, but Mercer found out. And Mercer does not fire people, Claire. He erases them. He kills their reputation. He drains their accounts. And if that doesn't work, he stages accidents." Miles leaned forward, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Grant knew he was a dead man walking, but he knew something else. He knew the first thing Mercer would do. Mercer would go after you. He would use you to make Grant give up the evidence. He would hurt you to break Grant. "So he divorced me?" I asked, my voice trembling. To save me? He had to make it look real, Miles said. If he just left, Mercer would know it was a strategy. He had to make you hate him. He had to make the world believe he was a scumbag who dumped his wife for a trophy. I froze. The image of the SUV flashed in my mind. The blonde hair, the diamond bracelet. The woman, I said. In the car, that day at the courthouse. Miles let out a short, dry laugh. It was a sound devoid of humor. Her name was Sheila, Miles said. She was an actress. Local theater. Grant paid her $500 to sit in the car and look expensive. The diamond bracelet was cubic zirconia. The car was a rental. I felt the air leave my lungs. She was an actress? I repeated. It was a play. Claire, Miles said. The whole thing, the cruelty, the cigarette, throwing the card in the mud. He rehearsed that line in the mirror for 3 days. Consider it payment for your time. He threw up in the bathroom before he left to meet you. He loved you more than he loved his own life. And he had to stand there and break your heart so thoroughly that you would never, ever try to find him. I covered my face with my hands. The tears came hot and fast, leaking through my fingers. All the hate, all the nights I had cursed his name, all the energy I had spent loathing him. It was all based on a lie. He needed you to be safe, Miles continued. He needed you to be so far away from him that when he disappeared, Mercer wouldn't look at you twice. And it worked. Mercer thought Grant was just another rich asshole who got bored of his wife. When Grant died in the fire, Mercer assumed the loose end was tied up. He didn't bother with the ex-wife living in a basement in Pawtucket. I wiped my face with the rough napkin. But the money, I said. Why the test? Why the 7 years? Because money leaves a trail, Miles said. If Grant had given you $1 million back then, Mercer would have seen it. He would have frozen it. Or worse, he would have come for it. Grant had to hide the money in a blind trust. He set up the algorithm. High risk, high reward trading. He turned $10,000 into $2 million using code he wrote himself. But the card, I said. Victor said if I used it, the account would have been normal. If you had used the card in the first year, Miles explained, the system would have just given you the 10 grand. That's it. Account closed. Game over. Grant figured if you used the money right away, you were just trying to survive. You weren't ready for the war. He pointed a shaking finger at me. But the escrow, he said, the sub-account, that was programmed to unlock only if the primary account remained untouched for 84 months. 7 years. It was a character test. Claire, Grant knew you. He knew your pride. He bet $2 million that you would rather starve than take his pity money. He bet on my stubbornness, I said bitterly. He bet on your strength, Miles corrected. He knew that if you could go 7 years without touching that card, you would be tough enough to handle the truth. You would be tough enough to help him finish what he started. I sat back against the vinyl booth. My head was spinning. So I am part of the plan? You are the fail-safe, Miles said. But Claire, do not think for a second that you did this alone. I frowned. What do you mean? I did it alone. I scrubbed toilets. I waited tables. I lived on ramen. Miles shook his head slowly. He looked down at his hands. Remember 3 years ago? He asked. You got hit by a delivery van on Commonwealth Avenue. Your car was totaled. The driver admitted fault immediately. His insurance paid out $4,000 within a week. That money paid your rent for 6 months. I got lucky, I said. The driver was drunk, Miles said. He wasn't going to admit anything. I went to his house the night before he gave his statement. I explained to him that if he didn't take full responsibility, certain photos of him would be sent to his wife. He admitted fault because I made him. I stared at him, my mouth opening slightly. And your landlord, Miles went on. Not Marla. The one before her, Mr. Henderson. He was going to evict you because he wanted to renovate the unit. Then suddenly, he changed his mind and let you renew your lease for another year at the same rate. Remember? He said he liked me as a tenant, I murmured. He changed his mind because Grant hacked his email and found out he was cheating on his taxes, Miles said. We sent him an anonymous tip that the IRS was looking into him. He was too scared to draw attention to himself by evicting anyone. And the job at Northline, Miles listed. You applied? You didn't have the data entry experience they wanted, but your resume got flagged for an interview anyway. You? I whispered. Me? Miles admitted. I know the HR director. I called in a favor. It wasn't a great job, but it had health insurance. We needed you to have insurance. I felt sick. So my independence, I said, my voice shaking. My struggle? It was all managed? It was a zoo exhibit? You were watching me the whole time? We were keeping you from drowning, Miles said intensely. We couldn't give you money. We couldn't let you know we were there, but we could nudge things. We could make sure the car accident didn't bankrupt you. We could make sure you had a roof. We kept you struggling, Claire, because struggling keeps you sharp. But we never let you fall. I didn't know whether to scream or thank him. I felt violated. My entire narrative of self-reliance, the story I told myself every night to keep from breaking, was a lie. I hadn't been standing on my own 2 feet. I had been propped up by invisible wires. I hate you, I whispered. I hate both of you. Good, Miles said. Hate keeps you warm. Hate keeps you moving. You are going to need that hate, Claire, because now that you walked into that bank, the clock is ticking. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a burner phone. He slid it across the table. Mercer knows, Miles said. The bank alert didn't just go to me. It went to a monitoring system Mercer has set up to track Grant's old assets. He knows the account is active. He knows you are the one who activated it. And he knows that if Grant left you money, he probably left you something else. The envelope, I said. The envelope, Miles agreed. Whatever is in there, Mercer wants it, and he will burn this whole city down to get it. He stood up. He threw a $20 bill on the table for water he hadn't drunk. Come on, he said. We can't stay here. I have a safe house. It is not much, but it has a door that locks and a shotgun under the bed. I looked at the newspaper clipping one last time. Grant Halstead, presumed dead. I looked at the man who had been my husband's best friend, a man I had thought was a traitor, but who had actually been my guardian angel in a leather jacket. I realized then that the poverty was over, the hunger was over, but the war had just begun. I slid out of the booth. I grabbed the burner phone. Let's go, I said. Take me to him. Miles paused. He looked at me with a sad, weary smile. I can't take you to him, Claire, he said. Grant isn't at the safe house. Grant is gone. He really is in the wind, but he left instructions, and tonight, you and I are going to follow them. He pushed open the door of the diner. The wet gray air of Chelsea rushed in, smelling of salt and diesel. Welcome to the team, Miles muttered. Try not to get us killed. We left the diner in Miles's truck, a battered pickup that smelled of old oil and spearmint gum. He drove us out of Chelsea and back toward the city, but we did not head toward the gleaming towers of the financial district. Instead, we wound our way into the gritty heart of South Boston. We stopped in front of a 3-story brick building that looked like it had been punched in the jaw and never quite healed. The windows were grimy, and the front stoop was chipped. It was the kind of place where people lived when they had run out of options, a place for ghosts and transients. 4th floor, Miles said, cutting the engine. Walk up, no elevator. My legs felt like lead as we climbed the narrow staircase. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and damp wool. When we reached the top landing, Miles pulled a key from his pocket. It was a simple brass key, unadorned, the kind you could copy at a hardware store for $2. He unlocked door number 4B and pushed it open. After you, he said. I stepped across the threshold, and the smell hit me instantly. It was not the smell of a home, it was the smell of stagnation, dust, cheap lemon bleach, and the dry paper-like scent of a room that has been holding its breath for a very long time. The apartment was a studio, Smaller than the one I had almost been evicted from that morning. It was aggressively minimalist. There was a single metal cot in the corner with a gray wool blanket folded with military precision. There was a small kitchenette that looked like it had never been used to cook a meal, just a kettle and a single mug sitting on the counter. But it was the window that drew my eye. The heavy blackout curtains were drawn tight, blocking out the afternoon light. However, there was a small gap in the center where a tripod had been set up. Mounted on the tripod was a pair of high-powered, tactical binoculars. They were black, matte, and looked heavy enough to crack a skull. I walked toward them. I felt a magnetic pull, a sickening curiosity. I leaned down and put my eyes to the rubber cups. My breath hitched in my throat. The lenses were focused with razor-sharp clarity on a building across the street and down the block. It was a brownstone with a fire escape zigzagging down the front. I recognized the chipped paint on the railing. I recognized the flower pot on the windowsill that had held a dead geranium for 2 years. It was my old apartment. Not the one I lived in now, but the one I had rented immediately after the divorce. The basement unit where I had spent the darkest 3 years of my life. I could see right into the living room window. I could see the spot where I used to sit on the floor and weep until I passed out. I could see the corner where I sat and counted pennies to buy rice. I pulled back from the binoculars, feeling a wave of nausea. "He watched me," I whispered. The words felt slimy in my mouth. "He sat here in the dark and watched me." "He didn't just watch," Miles said from the doorway. He hadn't come in. He stood there like a sentry. "Look at the wall." I turned. The wall to my left, the one I hadn't noticed in the gloom, was covered in corkboards. It looked like the lair of a serial killer or a detective obsessed with a cold case. There were maps of Boston with routes highlighted in different colors. There were timetables for the number 9 bus, my bus. There were printouts of weather forecasts from years ago. But it was the photos that made my knees weak. There were pictures of me, not posed photos, but surveillance shots. Me walking out of the grocery store, me waiting at the bus stop in the rain, me entering the North Line office, and around my photos were other photos. Strangers, men in suits I didn't recognize. Cars with their license plates circled in red marker. I stepped closer. The organization was terrifyingly precise. There were 3 columns on the board. The headers were written on index cards in Grant's handwriting. Sharp, angular, all caps, contact, threat, safe, under threat. I saw a photo of a man with a thick neck and a scar over his eyebrow. I recognized him. He was the loan shark who had threatened me last year. Next to his photo was a sticky note. Intercepted October 14th. Broken leg. Warned off. I gasped. I remembered that. The shark had suddenly stopped calling me. I heard he had an accident. Under contact. I saw a picture of my boss at Northline. There was a note. Financial pressure applied. Interview secured. And under safe. There was only one photo. It was a picture of me. Just me. I looked at the table beneath the board. There was no computer. Just a stack of papers and a thick, black moleskin notebook. I picked up the notebook. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. I opened it to the first page. I expected a diary. I expected, "Dear Diary, I miss Claire." I expected an apology. Instead, I found a manual. Protocol 1. Poverty threshold. Subject must remain below $20,000 annual liquidity. Comfort breeds complacency. Complacency invites Mercer. Keep her hungry. Hunger is camouflage. I read the words again. Subject. He called me subject. I flipped the pages. It was a log of my suffering, analyzed and managed like a stock portfolio. August 12th. Subject requires dental work. Cost, $800. Intervention required. Root funds through anonymous charity donation to the clinic. Do not let her know the source. November 3rd. Subject approached by unknown male at the Rusty Anchor. Threat assessment. Low. Male is intoxicated but harmless. No intervention. December 25th. Christmas. Subject spent day alone. Visual confirmation of crying at 1400 hours. Maintain distance. Do not engage. Pain is necessary for cover. I slammed the book shut. I felt like screaming. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. He had watched me cry on Christmas and written it down as a data point. He had let me suffer because my pain was his cover story. "He is a monster," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "He is sick." "Keep reading," Miles said softly. "The end of the book." I opened the notebook to the back pages. The handwriting was different here, less precise, more hurried. The ink was smeared in places, as if he had been writing while his hand was shaking. Protocol Omega. The breach. If Claire ever walks into Granite Harbor Bank, Packet A must be released. This indicates the subject has reached critical mass. The poverty shield is no longer viable. If she uses the card, she has broken. If she breaks, she is ready to know. I stared at the entry. Granite Harbor Bank. He knew, I whispered. He knew I would go there eventually. He hoped you wouldn't, Miles said. He hoped you would throw the card away. He hoped you would move to Ohio and marry a dentist and forget he ever existed. That is why the account had the 7-year timer. If you ignored it for 7 years, the money would have just sat there forever. But you kept the card. You kept the link. I looked down at the desk again. Beside the notebook, there was a small wooden picture frame. It was face down. I picked it up. It was a photo of us, our wedding day. We were laughing, cake smeared on our faces. We looked so young, so stupidly happy. I turned the frame over to look at the back. Taped to the cardboard backing with a strip of silver duct tape was a small, flat key. It looked like a key to a locker or a cabinet, and underneath the key was a receipt. Granite Harbor Bank, safe deposit box. Number 409, lease to the Prometheus Group. Prometheus, I read out loud. The god who stole fire, and got his liver eaten by an eagle for eternity, Miles added grimly. Grant had a flair for the dramatic. He walked over to me and took the frame from my hands. He peeled the key off carefully. This is it, Miles said. The $2 million? That is distraction money. That is walk-around cash. This key? This opens the box that holds the real reason Grant had to die. He held the key up to the sliver of light coming through the curtains. We have to move fast. Claire, Victor at the bank bought us some time, but Mercer has people inside the system. They will know the account was accessed. They will know Packet A was delivered, and they will deduce that Packet A leads to Box 409. What is in the box? I asked. Leverage, Miles said. Enough leverage to put Wade Mercer in a federal prison for the rest of his natural life, or enough leverage to get us both killed before dinner. I looked around the room one last time. I looked at the binoculars. I walked over to the tripod. I wrapped my hands around the cold metal barrel of the binoculars. I didn't look through them this time. I just held them. For 7 years. I had laid in bed in that basement apartment, staring at the ceiling, feeling a crushing sense of isolation. I had thought I was the loneliest person on earth. I had thought no one cared if I lived or died. But I was wrong. Someone had been here. Someone had been 4 floors up, drinking bad coffee, watching over me like a silent, twisted guardian angel. He had watched me sleep. He had watched me struggle. He had managed my pain because he believed it was the only way to keep me breathing. It was abusive. It was manipulative. It was horrifying. And yet, in the strange, dark logic of this room, it was also the most profound act of love I had ever known. He hadn't abandoned me. He had turned himself into a ghost to haunt the perimeter of my life, keeping the wolves at bay. I pressed my forehead against the binoculars. The metal was cold against my skin. He never left, I whispered. No, Miles said. He never did. But now he needs you to leave. We need to get to that safe deposit box before Mercer's team locks down the vault. I let go of the binoculars. I turned to Miles. Let's go get the fire, I said. I grabbed the black notebook. I wasn't leaving it here. It was the only history of my life that mattered now. We walked out of the room, leaving the dust and the ghosts behind. As Miles locked the door, I felt a strange sensation. I wasn't just Claire Martin, the victim of a bad divorce anymore. I was the subject. I was the protocol. And for the first time in 7 years, I was off the script. Miles drove the truck with one hand on the wheel and the other gripping a lukewarm cup of coffee he had picked up at a gas station. We were moving through the tangled streets of South Boston, heading away from the apartment, away from the binoculars, but I was not looking at the road. I was looking at the black notebook on my lap. The leather cover was warm for my hands. It felt heavy, not in ounces, but in gravity. It felt like I was holding a human heart. I opened it to the beginning. The first few pages were not financial data. They were not surveillance logs. They were a confession written in real time, dated 7 years ago, 2 days before the rain, 2 days before the divorce court. The handwriting was jagged. The pen pressed so hard into the paper that the ink had bled through to the other side. "She will hate me," he wrote. "I have to make sure she hates me. Hate is armor. If she loves me, she will try to find me. She will ask questions. She will knock on doors that should never be opened. But if she hates me, she will turn her back. She will walk away. Love makes her stay. Hate sets her free." I traced the words with my finger. Hate is armor. For 7 years. I had worn that armor. I had polished it every morning. I had used my hatred of Grant Halstead to deflect the pain of poverty, the loneliness, the crushing weight of failure. I thought the hate was my idea. I thought it was my rebellion. Now I realized it was his design. He had manufactured my rage because he knew it was the only thing strong enough to keep me from looking for him. He had broken my heart to save my life. I turned the page. The narrative stopped, replaced by the cold, clinical formatting of a logbook. It was a timeline of my life, written by a ghost. January 14th. Subject left apartment at 0730, arrived at Northline at 0815, returned home at 1800 hours. Subject purchased soup and bread. Safe. March 2nd. Subject missed the bus, walked 2 miles in snow. Visual confirmation of distress. No hostile tales observed. Safe. It went on like this for pages, month after month, year after year. He hadn't just watched me. He had cataloged me. He knew my schedule better than I did. He knew when I was sick. He knew when I was tired. The intimacy of it was suffocating. I felt a flush of heat rise up my neck. It wasn't romantic. It was invasive. It was the log of a zookeeper watching an animal in a cage. But then the nature of the entries changed. The logbook became a ledger. I saw numbers, amounts, dates. June 10th, 2019. Subject facing legal action from landlord regarding noise complaint. Legal fees estimated at $1,500. Subject has zero liquidity. I remembered that. Mr. Russo, my second landlord, had tried to evict me based on a noise complaint that was completely fabricated. I had been terrified. I couldn't afford a lawyer. Then, out of nowhere, a legal aid clinic had contacted me, saying my case had been selected for pro bono representation. A sharp-suited lawyer had shown up, destroyed Mr. Russo in a 10-minute meeting and vanished. I looked at the entry in the book. Action taken. Retainer paid to sliding scale firm via Shell Corp Alpha. Instruction: do not bill the client. Mark as charity case. My pro bono lawyer hadn't been charity. He had been a hired gun, paid for by the husband I thought was dead. I turned another page. September 2021. Subject's father requires pulmonary specialist. Insurance denied claim. Cost: $4,000. I stopped breathing for a second. That was the darkest month. Dad was coughing up fluid. The insurance company had sent a denial letter that felt like a death sentence. I had sat by his bed, holding his hand, praying for a miracle. And then, the hospital billing department had called. They said there had been a coding error and a private grant had covered the consultation. I read Grant's note. Action taken. Direct wire to hospital foundation. Anonymous donor tag. Note: save the old man. She needs him. I slammed the book shut on my fingers, gasping for air. He paid, I whispered. He paid for the lawyer. He paid for Dad. He paid for a lot of things, Miles said, his eyes scanning the rearview mirror. But never enough to make you comfortable, just enough to keep you afloat. Why? I demanded, opening the book again, tearing at the pages. If he had the money, why let me live in a rat hole? Why let me eat instant noodles? Why let me borrow from sharks? I found the answer on page 42. It was written in red ink, underlined twice. If she is forced to beg, she will break. Keep her struggling, but never drowning. The sentence hit me like a slap in the face. Keep her struggling. He had made a choice. He had decided that a comfortable Claire was a visible Claire. A Claire with a new car and a nice apartment would attract attention. A Claire who was desperate, tired, and invisible was safe. He had engineered my poverty. He had modulated my suffering like an engineer adjusting a dial. Turned the pain up just enough to keep her head down. Turned the relief up just enough to stop her from jumping off a bridge. Who gave him the right? I asked, my voice shaking with a mixture of fury and grief. Who gave him the right to play God with my life? To decide how much I should suffer? Wade Mercer, Miles said grimly. Mercer gave him the right, because the alternative was a closed casket funeral. I looked back at the book. The anger was still there, hot and biting, but beneath it, a cold realization was taking root. Grant hadn't been playing God for fun. He had been playing chess against the devil. I turned to the section marked Orchard and Vale. This was not about me. This was the reason for the war. Grant had documented everything. It was a dissection of a financial empire built on blood. Wade Mercer. The entry read, primary vector for laundering operations via offshore routing. Shell vendors identified in Panama, Cyprus, and Macau. The list of crimes was dizzying. Payoffs to port authorities to bypass inspections, bribes to senators to kill regulatory bills, money funneled from human trafficking rings into legitimate real estate developments in Miami and Boston. It wasn't just white-collar crime. It was dirty. It was violent. Mercer cleans the money that buys the bullets. Grant had written, he is the lung that lets the infection breathe. And then, a personal note, a note about me. Mercer's leverage protocol. If they cannot buy her, they will scare her. If she has assets, they will freeze them. If she has a reputation, they will ruin it. But if she is a nobody, a divorced, broke, bitter woman with no connections, she is invisible. They cannot squeeze blood from a stone. I have to make her a stone. I stared at the words. I have to make her a stone. He had stripped me of everything, my money, my status, my husband, to turn me into something so hard and unappealing that the predators would swim right past me. He had sacrificed my happiness to ensure my survival. It was a terrifying, twisted kind of love. It was a love that didn't care if I was happy. As long as I was breathing, it was the love of a soldier, not a husband. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and angry. I wiped it away. I didn't want to cry for him. I wanted to punch him, and then I wanted to hold him. The conflict was tearing me apart. I reached the final written page. The ink looked fresh, or maybe just preserved by the darkness of the closed book. If I disappear, Grant wrote, it means the timeline has advanced. If you are reading this, Claire, it means you walked into the bank. It means the poverty shield has failed, or you finally decided you had enough. I read on, my heart hammering against my ribs. You have a choice now. The money in the account is clean. It is yours. You can take it. You can run. Go to a country with no extradition treaty. Change your name. Live the life I stole from you. Or you can open Packet A. You can take the key, and you can burn their world down legally. I cannot ask you to do this. I have already asked too much. But if you choose to fight, know this. I did not leave you defenseless. I left you a weapon. The money is not a gift. Claire, it is ammunition. I looked up at the road ahead. The gray skyline of Boston was looming closer. The rain had started again, light droplets hitting the windshield. He gave me an out, I said to Miles. He said I could run. Miles didn't look at me. He kept his eyes on the traffic. You could, he said. With $2 million, you could disappear pretty well. You could be sipping mojitos in Bali by Tuesday. Is that what he wants? He wants you to be safe, Miles said. Running is safe. Fighting is not. I looked at the notebook. I looked at the log of my life. Subject kept struggling. I thought about the night I ate cold beans. I thought about the night I walked 6 miles in the dark because I couldn't pay the tow truck. I thought about the humiliation of Marla Jenkins banging on my door. Grant had forced me to struggle. He had forced me to be a stone. But stones are not just for hiding. Stones are for throwing. I wasn't the same woman who had knelt in the mud in Providence. That woman would have run. That woman would have taken the money and hidden in a hole, grateful for the scraps. But 7 years of hell had changed me. 7 years of fighting for every inch of ground had made me mean. It had made me tough. I didn't want to run. I didn't want to hide in Bali and look over my shoulder for the rest of my life, wondering if Wade Mercer was coming for me. I wanted to finish it. I wanted to take this notebook and whatever was in that safe deposit box, and I wanted to shove it down Wade Mercer's throat. I wanted to use the legal system that had failed me to destroy the man who thought he owned the world. Turn around, I said. Miles glanced at me. What? We are not going to the safe house, I said. Not yet. Claire, we have to. I said turn around, I said, my voice hard. I need to go back to Granite Harbor Bank, or at least to the secure branch where the boxes are. You want to open the box? Miles asked. Now? With Mercer's team tracking the alert? Grant said the money is ammunition, I said. Well, I can't fire a gun with an empty magazine. I need the rest of the file. I need packet A. Miles stared at me for a second. Then, a slow grin spread across his tired face. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a wolf's smile. You really are his wife, he muttered. He spun the wheel. The truck lurched as we made a U-turn, tires screeching on the wet asphalt. The box isn't at the main branch, Miles said. It is at a private depository in the back bay, high security, independent from the banking grid. That is where the key fits. Then take me there, I said. I closed the notebook. I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I didn't feel like a subject. I felt like a weapon that had finally been loaded. 7 years, I whispered to the rain streaking the glass. 7 years of eating dirt. Well, I am done eating. I touched the envelope in my bag. The first part of the puzzle. I held the black card in my pocket, and I held the notebook on my lap. I was ready to burn their world down, and I was going to enjoy watching the flames. The private depository in Back Bay was a fortress disguised as a brownstone. It did not look like a bank. There was no signage, no ATM, and no glass doors. There was only a heavy oak entrance and a camera system that tracked the iris of your eye before the lock even considered clicking. Miles parked the truck 3 blocks away to avoid cameras, and we walked the rest of the distance in the rain. When we arrived, Victor Dorsey was waiting in the vestibule. He looked even paler than he had in his office, his suit jacket buttoned wrong, as if he had dressed in the dark. Ms. Martin, Victor said, his voice a hushed wire of tension. You are officially listed as a visitation for Box 409, but we have to be quick. The compliance hold I placed on the main account is drawing attention from the Regional Oversight Committee. I can keep them stalled for maybe another hour. He led us down a spiral staircase into the earth. The air here was filtered, cool, and smelled of nothing. It was a vacuum. We passed rows of steel boxes, silent tombs of wealth and secrets. Victor stopped at Box 409. He inserted his master key. I inserted the small flat key I had peeled off the back of the wedding photo. The lock tumbled with a heavy, satisfying clunk. Victor pulled the long metal drawer out and carried it to a small viewing room. It was a windowless cube with a table and a single lamp. I will stand guard outside, Victor said. You need to sign this first. He slid a document across the table. Release of legacy materials. I signed it. My signature looked jagged. The hand of a stranger. Victor nodded and left, closing the heavy door. I looked at the metal box. Miles stood behind me, his hand resting on the back of my chair, a silent anchor. "Open it," Miles said. I lifted the lid. There was no money inside, no gold bars, no diamonds. There was a thick manila envelope labeled Cedar and Slate Legal Group. It was a fictional law firm. I knew that much. Grant had invented it, and sitting on top of the envelope was a silver USB drive. It was taped to a piece of cardstock. On the card, in Grant's handwriting, were 2 words: "Play me." Miles reached into his jacket and pulled out a battered laptop. He set it on the table, booted it up, and plugged in the drive. A single video file appeared on the screen. The file name was simply protocol_omega.mp4. "Are you ready?" Miles asked. "No," I said, "but press it anyway." Miles hit the spacebar. The screen flickered from black to a grainy, slightly underlit image. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. It was Grant, but it was not the Grant I remembered from the courthouse. It was not the polished, cold man in the wool coat. He was sitting in the room with the binoculars. I recognized the peeling wallpaper behind him. He was wearing a white t-shirt that was stained with sweat, and his face. There was a dark, purple bruise blooming across his left cheekbone. His lip was split. He looked exhausted, his eyes rimmed with red, his hair messy. He looked like a man who had been running for days. He looked at the camera lens. He adjusted the focus. Then he sat back and let out a long, shaky breath. "Hello, Claire," he said. Hearing his voice, stripped of the distortion of memory, hit me like a physical blow. It was warm. It was familiar. It was the voice that used to whisper to me in the dark. "If you are watching this," Grant said, "then I am already gone, on paper, at least, and if you are watching this, it means the 7 years are up. It means you walked into Granite Harbor Bank. It means you are alive." He leaned forward, wincing slightly as if his ribs hurt. "I have so much to explain, and I have about 10 minutes before I have to wipe this drive and get out of here. So I am going to be blunt." He looked down at his hands for a second, then back at the camera. "The divorce was a lie," he said. "The woman in the car, an actress, the cruelty, a script. The way I threw that card in the mud, that was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life." I felt the tears prick my eyes, hot and stinging. "I needed you to hate me, Claire," he continued. "I needed you to despise me so much that you would never, ever try to find me, because if you loved me, you would have asked questions, you would have looked for me, and if you looked for me, Wade Mercer would have found you." He said the name Wade Mercer with a terrifying weight. "Mercer does not just win arguments, Claire. He buries people. He erases entire families. When I found out what he was doing, the laundering, the trafficking, the payoffs, I knew I was a dead man, but I had one thing he couldn't buy. I had one thing he couldn't touch." Grant smiled, a sad, broken smile. "I had my wife's future. So I cut you loose," he said. "I severed the limb to save the body. I made you a stranger so that when they came for me, they would look at you and see nothing but a bitter ex-wife who wanted nothing to do with me. I made you invisible." He took a sip of water from a plastic bottle. His hand was shaking. "Now, about the money," he said. "The $2.46 million. I leaned closer to the screen. "You probably think it is just compound interest on the $10,000, Grant said. "It is not. That account has an escrow sublayer. I liquidated everything I had, my 401k, my personal savings, the money I made from selling the boat before I burned it. I hid it all in that trust." He pointed a finger at the camera. "But here is the catch. I put a lock on it, a 7-year time lock. If you had used that card in year 1, or year 3, or year 6, the system would have given you the 10 grand and dissolved the rest into a charity fund. I needed to know you were ready. I needed to know you were tough enough." "If you are seeing this," Grant said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "it means you waited. It means you suffered. And I am so sorry for that. But it also means you are the right person, at the right time. The money is not a gift, Claire. It is a war chest. He held up a thick gray folder to the camera. This is folder gray, he said. It is currently sitting in the bottom of the safe deposit box you just opened. It contains every transaction Wade Mercer has made in the last decade. It has the names of the politicians he bought. It has the routing numbers for the shell companies in Panama. It has the photos of the people he made disappear. Grant put the folder down. I cannot take this to the FBI, he said. I am a ghost. Dead men cannot testify. But you? You are a citizen. You are a victim of financial abuse. You are clean. Your mission, if you choose to accept it, and God, I hope you do not, but I know you will, is to take folder gray to Special Agent David Vance at the Boston Federal Building. Only him, no one else. He is the only one Mercer doesn't own. Grant's face hardened. But listen to me. Claire, this is the most important part. Do not be a hero. Do not try to confront Mercer. Do not try to wear a wire. Be smart. Let the law do the killing. Use the money to hire the best security you can find. Use the money to build a fortress around yourself. Hand over the evidence. Give your deposition. And then step back and watch the fire. The video was nearing its end. I could see Grant checking his watch. The urgency was bleeding into his voice. I have to go, he said. Miles is waiting downstairs. He looked at the camera one last time. The mask of the tactical genius slipped, and for a second, I just saw the man I had married, the man who used to make me pancakes on Sundays. I am sorry I loved you like a coward, he whispered. I should have told you. I should have trusted you, but I couldn't risk you. I would rather have you hate me and be alive than love me and be dead. The screen started to fade. One last thing, Grant said. His voice hurried. Now that the money is visible, the sharks will come. Not just Mercer, everyone. Cousins you haven't seen in 10 years. Friends who forgot your birthday. If anyone suddenly cares about you now, Claire assumed they are here for the money. Trust no one but Miles. Goodbye, Claire. Live free. Don't be my prison. The screen went black. I sat there in the silence of the vault. The hum of the laptop fan sounded like a jet engine. I couldn't move. My chest felt like it had been cracked open. I am sorry I loved you like a coward. The sentence hung in the air. I looked at Miles. He was staring at the blank screen, his jaw set hard. He had seen this before, or at least he knew what was on it. He had carried the weight of this secret while I carried the weight of my poverty. He looked so hurt, I whispered. His face. He got jumped by 2 of Mercer's guys the night before he made that, Miles said quietly. That was why he accelerated the timeline. That was why he burned the boat. He knew they were getting close. I reached into the metal box and pulled out the gray folder. It was heavy, thicker than I expected. It was a brick of paper that had the power to destroy a billionaire. I thought about the last 7 years. I thought about the eviction notices. I thought about the look in Renee Sloane's eyes at the bank. I thought about the man in the gray hoodie watching me from across the street. Grant had played a long, cruel game, but he had played it to win. He hadn't just left me money. He had left me a loaded gun and pointed me at the target. Let the law do the killing, I repeated. I stood up. My legs felt steady now. The trembling was gone. The fear was gone. In its place was a cold, crystalline clarity. Miles, I said, where's the federal building? Government Center, Miles said. About 20 minutes from here if we hit the lights right. And who is Special Agent David Vance? He is the head of the Financial Crimes Division, Miles said. He has been trying to nail Mercer for 5 years. He just never had the smoking gun. I tapped the gray folder. Well, I said. He just got the bullets. I picked up the USB drive. I picked up the envelope for the fake law firm Cedar and Slate. Inside, I found the incorporation papers for the trust, the instructions on how to access the funds, and a list of security firms Grant recommended. I put everything in my peeling fake leather bag. It seemed ridiculous that something so cheap could hold something so valuable. Victor, I called out. The heavy door opened instantly. Victor Dorsey stepped in. We are done, I said. Seal the box, but I'm taking the contents. Victor nodded. He didn't ask questions. He just looked at the empty metal drawer and then at me. Be careful, Ms. Martin, he said. The alert I saw wasn't just a notification, it was a hunting license. I know, I said. Let them hunt. I am not the prey anymore. We walked out of the vault, climbing back up the spiral stairs. As we reached the lobby of the private depository, my phone buzzed. It was the burner phone Miles had given me. I looked at the screen. It was a text message. Hello, Claire. It has been a long time. We should talk. The number was unfamiliar, but I knew who it was. Mercer, Miles said, looking over my shoulder. He is fast, I said. He is terrified, Miles corrected. He knows the timer just went off. He knows the escrow unlocked. He is trying to get to you before you get to Vance. I typed a reply. My thumbs moved quickly. Talk to my lawyer. I hit send. I turned to Miles. Let's go find Agent Vance. I have a delivery to make. We stepped out into the rain. The city of Boston looked different now. It wasn't a place of struggle anymore. It was a battlefield, and for the first time in 7 years. I wasn't just trying to survive the day, I was going to own it. They say money talks, but that is a lie. Money screams. It screams at a frequency that only the greedy and the desperate can hear. And apparently, my new net worth was broadcasting on all channels. I do not know how the leak happened. Miles suspected a low-level data entry clerk at the credit bureau saw my liquidity jump from negative $300 to over $2 million in a single nanosecond and sold the lead to a list of sharks. Or maybe someone at the bank, someone less loyal than Victor Dorsey, whispered a name in a bar. It did not matter how it happened. What mattered was that less than 6 hours after I left the vault, my phone, the same phone that had been silent for years except for debt collectors, began to vibrate with the relentless intensity of a jackhammer. I sat in the passenger seat of Miles's truck, watching the notifications stack up on the cracked screen. There was a text from a cousin I had not spoken to since the Obama administration. Hey Claire, I had a dream about you last night. So weird. We should grab coffee. Miss you. There was a voicemail from a friend from college who had uninvited me to her baby shower because I couldn't afford a gift. She was crying in the message, talking about how much she valued our shared history. And then there was Marla Jenkins, my landlady, the woman who, at 6 o'clock this morning, had threatened to throw my belongings onto the sidewalk. She called 3 times in a row. When I didn't answer, she sent a text that made me physically nauseous. Claire, honey, I was just thinking about our little chat this morning. I was so stressed. I hope you know I would never actually evict you. You are like family. I made that lemon bundt cake you like. Come by when you get home. I read the message out loud to Miles. He snorted, a harsh sound that matched the grinding of the truck's gears. You are not a person to them anymore, Miles said. You are a walking ATM. They smell the cash. Claire, it is like blood in the water. It is disgusting, I said, deleting the thread. They treated me like dirt yesterday. Today I am family? Money does not change people, Miles said, checking the side mirror for tails. It just takes their masks off. Yesterday, their mask was indifference because you were useless to them. Today, their mask is love because they want a cut. The dirt was always there. The money just put a spotlight on it. We were parked in the lot of a Motel 6 off the highway, a temporary safe point while Miles arranged a meeting with the lawyers Grant had set up. I needed to pee, but I was afraid to leave the truck. A sleek gray sedan pulled into the lot. It didn't look like a police car, and it didn't look like a random guest. It was a Mercedes, too clean for this part of town. A man got out. He was wearing a suit that cost more than the truck we were sitting in. He adjusted his tie and walked straight toward us. Miles, I warned. I see him, Miles said. His hand dropped to the door handle. The man tapped on my window. He had a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. I rolled the window down 2 inches. "Ms. Martin?" he said. Smooth voice, radio announcer voice. "My name is Arthur Sterling. I represent a private wealth management firm specializing in sudden liquidity events." "I did not call a wealth manager," I said. "Of course not," Sterling said. "We track these things. We want to help you protect your assets. Specifically, we understand there are certain legacy materials involved. A digital drive, some documents. These can be liabilities if not handled correctly." My blood ran cold. He wasn't talking about the money. He was talking about the USB. He was talking about folder gray. Miles leaned across me. "Get lost, pal." "Mr. Kincaid," Sterling said, acknowledging him without blinking. "You are out of your depth. Wade Mercer is very generous to people who cooperate. He is very unpleasant to people who hold on to things that do not belong to them. The mask didn't just slip. It shattered." "She has nothing for you," Miles growled. $2 million is a lot of money," Sterling said, looking back at me. "But it is not enough to buy safety. Mr. Mercer is willing to double it, just for the envelope in your bag. Instant transfer. No questions. $4 million. To sell out Grant. To let the monster win." I looked at Arthur Sterling. I saw the greed in his eyes, the absolute confidence that everyone has a price. "Tell Mr. Mercer," I said, my voice steady, "that the price of my husband's life has gone up. It is not for sale." I hit the button to roll up the window. Sterling didn't move his hand until the glass almost pinched his fingers. He stared at us, his smile gone, replaced by a cold, reptilian stare. "Drive," I told Miles. We peeled out of the lot, leaving Sterling standing there. An hour later, we were in the conference room of a very real law firm in downtown Boston. It wasn't Cedar and Slate, that was the code name, but a firm called Steinberg and O'Malley. Grant had paid the retainer years ago. I sat at a mahogany table, signing document after document. We set up a blind trust. We froze all large transfers. We set up a digital firewall that would make it impossible for anyone to track my location through my bank transactions. I was learning the first rule of being rich. You have to build a fortress before you can enjoy the view. "We need to talk about the witness," Miles said to the lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Ellen. "We need Sheila." "The actress?" Ellen asked. "We found her. She is working at a dive bar in Southie. Her life did not turn out as well as yours. Claire." "Bring her in," I said. 2 hours later, Sheila sat across from me. I recognized her, but barely. The blonde hair was brittle and dyed a harsh yellow. The skin around her eyes was tired. She wore a cheap waitress uniform and smelled of stale beer. When she saw me, she flinched. She looked like she expected me to hit her. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I needed the money. Grant paid me $500, and then afterwards, some men came, men in suits. They told me if I ever told anyone it was an act. I would never work in this town again. They terrified me." I looked at the woman I had hated for 7 years. I had built an entire mythology around her. I thought she was a homewrecker. I thought she was living in luxury with my husband. She was just another victim. Wade Mercer had ground her down just like he had ground me down. He had used her as a prop and then threatened to destroy her if she spoke. "I do not hate you, Sheila," I said. She looked up, surprised. "I don't?" "No," I said. But I need you to do something for me. I need you to go on the record. I need you to tell a federal agent exactly what happened that day. That it was a script. That you were hired." "They will kill me," she stammered. "No, they won't," I said. "Because I am going to hire a private security detail to stand outside your door 24 hours a day. I have the money now, and we are going to burn them down before they can touch you." Sheila looked at me. She saw the new clothes I had bought, a simple blazer, jeans that didn't have holes. But more than that, she saw the look in my eyes. "Okay," she whispered. "I will do it. For Grant. He was nice to me. He apologized before he got in the car. He was crying. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. The phone rang again. It was the burner. One last chance. The text read, "Meet at the waterfront. Alone. We can settle this." "It is Mercer," Miles said. "Or his top fixer. They are desperate." "I am going," I said.
"No," Miles and Ellen said in unison. "I am going," I repeated. But not alone, and not unprepared. I met the intermediary on a public bench near the aquarium. It was raining again. It seemed fitting. He was a different man than Sterling. Older, harder. He didn't offer a handshake. "You are making a mistake. Ms. Martin," he said. "Wade Mercer is a pillar of this community. You are a woman with a very sudden, very suspicious windfall. If you try to release whatever fabricated evidence your ex-husband left you, we will tie you up in court for 20 years. You will be broke again in 6 months." I had a wire taped to my chest. Ellen was listening in a van down the street. "Are you offering me a settlement?" I asked, loud enough for the microphone. "I am offering you a consulting fee," the man said carefully. $5 million for the return of proprietary company data. "And if I refuse?" The man leaned in. "Then we look into your father's medical bills. We look into that loan you took out. We look into everything. Accidents happen. Ms. Martin, people get hurt. Is that a threat?" I asked. "It is a forecast," he said. I stood up. I had what I needed. He had just admitted to knowing about the data, and he had threatened a federal witness. "My forecast is different," I said. "I predict a storm." I walked away. My legs were shaking, but I didn't look back. I was almost back to the van when a hand grabbed my arm. I spun around, ready to fight. It wasn't a hitman. It was Jason, the friend who had ignored my birthday for 7 years, the one who had walked past me in the grocery store when I was using food stamps. He looked disheveled. He had been crying. "Claire," he gasped. "Oh my God. I have been looking everywhere for you. I heard you came into some money." I pulled my arm away. "What do you want, Jason?" "It is my business," he sobbed. "I made some bad calls. I owe people, Claire, bad people. I need 50 grand. Just a loan. I know you have it. Please, we go way back. Remember sophomore year?" I looked at him. I remembered sophomore year. I also remembered the year I asked him for $20 to buy antibiotics, and he told me he didn't lend money to friends. "I remember," I said. "Please," he begged, reaching for my hand again. "I am drowning here." I looked at his designer shoes. I looked at his desperate, greedy eyes. "I am sorry you are in trouble, Jason," I said. "Truly. So you will help?" "No," I said. His face twisted. "You bitch! You have millions. What is 50 grand to you?" "It is 50 grand," I said. "But that is not the point. The point is, where were you when I was drowning? Where were you when I was eating beans out of a can?" "That is different," he yelled. "No," I said, my voice dropping to a temperature that matched the Boston harbor. "It is exactly the same. You didn't care about my blood then. I do not care about your debt now. I am your friend." "You are a vulture," I said. "And I don't feed vultures. I don't use the blood of other people to fund your greed. Goodbye, Jason." I got into the van. Miles was waiting. "Did you get it?" I asked. "We got the threat on tape," Miles said. "It is admissible. But Claire, we have a problem." "What?" "We are not going to the federal building," he said. "Agent Vance isn't there." My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "He is here," Miles said. He pointed to the back of the van. A man was sitting in the shadows. He was wearing a trench coat and looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He held up a badge. "Ms. Martin," Special Agent David Vance said. "I have been waiting for you to walk into that bank for 7 years. Your husband sent me a signal the moment the account unlocked." I stared at him. "You knew?" I whispered. "You knew he was alive?" "I knew he was a protected asset," Vance said.
We faked the death. Claire. We put him in deep cover. But we couldn't move on Mercer until the money moved. We needed the financial trail to reactivate. We needed you to be the catalyst. I felt the world tilt. I wasn't just a failsafe, I realized. I was the bait. You were the key, Vance corrected. Grant didn't just leave you evidence. He made you the executor of the estate. Without you, that box could never be opened. Without you. The chain of custody didn't exist. He held out his hand. Give me the folder. Claire, let's go finish this. I looked at the folder in my bag. I looked at Miles. I looked at the rain streaking the windows. I wasn't a victim of a bad marriage. I was the final operative in a 7-year sting operation, and I had just delivered the payload. I handed the folder to Agent Vance. Nail him, I said. Nail him to the wall. Vance smiled, a grim, satisfied expression. Buckle up. Ms. Martin, we are about to ruin a lot of powerful people's day. The federal courthouse in Boston smelled of floor wax and anxiety. It was a smell I had grown used to over the last 3 weeks, a sharp, chemical scent that coated the back of my throat. I sat in the witness box, my hands resting on the smooth wood of the railing. To my left, the jury box was filled with 12 strangers who were looking at me with a mixture of curiosity and exhaustion. To my right, at the defense table, sat Wade Mercer. He did not look like the monster Miles had described. He looked like a grandfather. He was wearing a soft gray suit and reading glasses, and he was taking notes on a yellow legal pad with a calm, practiced demeanor. But every now and then, he would look up. He would look at me. And behind those wire-rimmed glasses, I saw the shark. I saw the eyes of a man who would burn a city to the ground to save his quarterly earnings. Ms. Martin, the prosecutor said. He was a tall man named Peterson, hand-picked by Agent Vance. Let us go back to the day of your divorce. Your husband gave you a debit card. How much money was on that card? $10,000, I said. My voice was steady. I was not the shivering girl in the rain anymore. And in the 7 years following that day, Peterson asked, pacing slowly in front of the jury, how much of that money did you spend? 0, I said. A ripple went through the courtroom. 0? Peterson repeated. Ms. Martin, the court has seen your financial records. We know you were evicted twice. We know you had medical debt. We know there were days you went hungry. Why did you not use the money? I looked at Wade Mercer. I looked at the jury. Because I thought it was payment for my silence, I said clearly. I thought it was a bribe to make me go away, and I decided that my dignity was worth more than $10,000. The defense attorney, a man with a smile like a razor blade, tried to paint me as a gold digger during cross-examination. He tried to suggest that I was part of the laundering scheme, that the $2.46 million was my cut, but the facts were stubborn things. If I was a partner in the crime, I asked him, leaning into the microphone, why did I work as a waitress for 6 years? Why did I scrub toilets? Why did I live in a basement with mold on the walls? The defense attorney had no answer. My poverty was my shield. The 7 years of hell I had endured had turned into the most unimpeachable alibi in legal history. I wasn't a co-conspirator. I was the proof of Grant's desperate attempt to protect me. Then came the evidence. Agent Vance walked in with folder gray. It wasn't just a folder anymore. It was a digital avalanche. We projected the documents onto the screens in the courtroom. We showed the jury the offshore accounts. We showed them the shell companies. We showed them the emails where Wade Mercer authorized the intimidation of witnesses. Sheila took the stand. She was shaking, but she was brave. She told the jury about the script. She told them about the $500. She told them about the threats. And then, the bank records. We showed the escrow account. We showed the algorithm Grant had written. We showed the Level 1 directive. This money, Peterson told the jury, pointing to the screen, was not profit. It was a dead man's switch. It was designed to trigger only when the defendant, Wade Mercer, made his move. It was a trap. Ladies and gentlemen, And Mr. Mercer walked right into it. Wade Mercer stopped taking notes. He took off his glasses. He looked at the screen, where his entire empire was being dissected line by line. For the first time, the shark looked afraid. He looked at me, and he didn't see prey. He saw the fisherman. The verdict came back in 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: racketeering, money laundering, witness tampering, conspiracy to commit murder. When the judge read the sentence, Wade Mercer didn't scream. He didn't fight. He just slumped in his chair. A deflated balloon of a man. The marshals moved in. The handcuffs clicked, and the sound echoed through the room like the final period at the end of a long, terrible sentence. I walked out of the courtroom into the hallway. The press was there, a wall of cameras and microphones. But Agent Vance and his team formed a wedge, pushing me through. We went to a private conference room in the back of the building. Miles was there. He looked 10 years younger. "We got him," Miles said, grinning. "He is going away for life. No parole." "We got him," I agreed. I felt lightheaded. "It is over." "Not quite," Agent Vance said. He closed the door. The room went quiet. Vance pulled a file out of his briefcase. It was stamped Top Secret/WITSEC. "Claire," Vance said gently, "there is one more thing you need to know. During the discovery phase, we had to declassify certain assets to build the case against Mercer." He slid a photo across the table. It was a surveillance photo taken 3 days ago. It showed a man working on a fishing boat in a harbor. I didn't recognize the harbor. The water was too blue to be Boston. The man had a beard. His hair was gray. He was wearing rough work clothes. But I knew the set of his shoulders. I knew the way he held the rope. "Grant," I whispered. "He is alive," Vance said. "Officially. He has been in the Federal Witness Protection Program for 5 years. The boat explosion was a sanctioned extraction. We needed him to disappear completely so Mercer would stop hunting him, and to do that, he had to cut all ties, including you." I stared at the photo. My husband, the man I had grieved, the man I had hated, the man I had loved. He was alive. He was breathing. He was out there, somewhere in the world, gutting fish and watching the sun set. I felt a scream building in my chest. It was a mix of fury and relief so potent it made my hands shake. He had lied to me. He had let me mourn him. He had let me think I was a widow. But then I remembered the binoculars. I remembered the logbook. Keeper struggling, but never drowning. He hadn't left me to save himself. He had left me to save me. If I had known he was alive, I would have looked for him. If I had looked for him, Mercer would have killed us both. "Can I see him?" I asked. My voice was small. "Can I go to him?" Vance looked at me with sad eyes. He shook his head slowly. "No, Claire. That is not how the program works. He is a protected witness. His new identity is classified. If you go to him, you compromise everything. You put a target back on his back." He reached into the file again. "But he asked me to give you this," Vance said. He wrote it the day he signed the plea deal that put Mercer away. He handed me a plain white envelope. There was no stamp. No return address, just my name, written in that familiar, sharp handwriting. I took it. I walked to the window. I turned my back on Vance and Miles. I opened the envelope. There was a single sheet of paper. "Claire, I am not going to ask for forgiveness. What I did to you was unforgivable. I broke your heart to save your life, and I know that is a trade no one should have to make. You waited 7 years. That is why I trusted you. I knew you were the only person in the world strong enough to carry this burden without breaking. I knew you would hold on to that card. I knew you would find the key. The money is yours. It is clean. Vance has cleared it as a reward for your cooperation and damages for the emotional distress. It is legal. No one can take it from you. Do not look for me. I am not the man you married anymore. That man died in the fire. I am a ghost now. And ghosts do not belong in the land of the living. You have a second chance. Claire, you have the money. You have your freedom. You have the truth. Do not waste it chasing a memory. Live free. Don't be my prison. I read the letter twice. Don't be my prison. He was right. If I spent the rest of my life looking for him, waiting for him, pining for him, I would still be trapped. I would still be the woman in the basement, defined by a man who wasn't there. He was giving me the ultimate divorce settlement. He was giving me myself. I folded the letter. I put it in my pocket. I turned back to the room. I wiped my eyes. "Okay," I said. "He is gone." "Claire," Miles started, taking a step forward. "No," I said, holding up a hand. "I mean it. He is gone. And I am here." I looked at Agent Vance. "The money," I said. "The 2.46 million, plus the interest." "It is all yours," Vance said. "The Treasury has released the hold. It will be in your account by morning." "Good," I said, "because I have some shopping to do. I didn't buy a yacht. I didn't buy a mansion. I bought justice." The next day, I sat in the office of Steinberg and O'Malley. We established the Martin Halstead Legal Defense Fund. I want to find every person Wade Mercer ever hurt. I told the lawyers. I want to find the people he evicted, the small business owners he bankrupted, the families of the people who had accidents, and I want to pay them back. I want to pay their legal fees. I want to pay their medical bills. I want to pay for their kids to go to college. That will deplete the capital quickly, Ellen warned. "I don't care," I said. "I don't want his money. It is blood money. The only way to clean it is to use it to heal the wounds he caused. I want to use Wade Mercer's fortune to destroy Wade Mercer's legacy." And then, I dealt with the vultures. I had the lawyers draw up a series of ironclad trusts. I created a will that left everything to the foundation. I sent a certified letter to Jason, to my cousins, to every fake friend who had crawled out of the woodwork. The letter was simple. My assets are held in a blind charitable trust. I have no personal access to the funds. Please direct all future inquiries to my legal team. It was a polite way of saying, the bank is closed. Get a job. My phone stopped ringing within 3 days. It was amazing how quickly people lose interest when they realize the tap is dry. Marla Jenkins tried one last time. She came to my door with another cake. I didn't open the door. I spoke to her through the wood. "Marla," I said, "I am moving out tomorrow. You can keep the security deposit, but if you ever threaten another tenant the way you threatened me, I will buy this building and turn it into a free parking lot." She left the cake on the mat and ran. 2 weeks later, I stood on the sidewalk in downtown Boston. It was raining again. The sky was a heavy slate gray, pouring water onto the streets, turning the city into a watercolor painting of neon lights and wet pavement. 7 years ago, I had stood in this rain in Providence, soaking wet, shivering, clutching a piece of plastic that I thought was an insult. I had felt small. I had felt powerless. Tonight, I was wearing a trench coat that was made of cashmere and wool. It was warm. It fit perfectly. I walked into a store, not a discount store, a high-end luggage shop. "Can I help you, ma'am?" the clerk asked. "Yes," I said. "I need an umbrella." He showed me one. It was black, with a solid oak handle and a canopy made of high-density silk. It cost $200. 7 years ago. $200 was my food budget for a month. $200 was a life-or-death decision. "I will take it," I said. I paid with the black card. The transaction cleared instantly. No fear, no hesitation. I walked out of the store. I opened the umbrella. It made a solid, satisfying thwump sound as it locked into place. I stepped out into the downpour. The rain hammered against the silk. But I was dry. The water ran off the sides, splashing harmlessly onto the pavement. I thought about Grant. I thought about him on his boat. Somewhere in the middle of a blue ocean. I hoped he was dry too. I thought about Wade Mercer, sitting in a 6x8 cell, listening to the rain hit the bars of his window. And I thought about the girl I used to be, the girl who lived on hate. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of rain and ozone and exhaust. It smelled like Boston. It smelled like the future. I didn't have a husband. I didn't have a bitterness to keep me warm anymore. I started to walk. I didn't know where I was going. Maybe to get a hot dinner. Maybe to a movie. Maybe just to walk until my legs got tired. For the first time in 7 years. I wasn't running from something. I wasn't running towards something. I was just walking. I gripped the handle of my $200 umbrella. I lifted my chin. And I stepped into the night. Not as a victim, not as a survivor, but as a woman who had walked through the fire and come out holding the water. I was Claire Martin, and I was finally, truly living. Thank you so much for listening to Claire's story. It has been a wild ride from that rainy courthouse to this final moment of freedom. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a busy subway in New York, a quiet room in London, or maybe somewhere sunny like California? Drop a comment below and let me know your location and what you thought of Claire's choice at the end. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Leona Revenge Stories for more dramas like this one. Hit that like button, and if you really want to support the channel, smash that hype button so we can share these stories with even more people. See you in the next video.